Welcome into another PFF Draft Short. I am Steve Palazzolo, joined with Josh Liskowitz. Today we are discussing Jamal Adams, LSU safety. And Josh, here's a player that is getting hype as a top 5 potential pick, top 10 potential pick, a guy that has versatile safety written all over him. He can play in the box, he can play deep. You had a crazy take that I think some other guys actually jumped on board with along the way. I'll let you get into that in a second, but what do you see from Jamal Adams as far as what he brings to the table for a defense, and why is he being discussed in the conversation as a top 5 type of guy?
Well, as you said, Steve, he has a little bit of everything, but above everything else, he has coverage skills. Coverage skills are important for being a safety, especially in today's NFL. But when you see how he moves, I don't care that he ran 4.5 and other guys are running low 4.4s, possibly even 4.3s. His speed is plenty fast on the field. His playing speed is right where it needs to be. But you see how he moves, his change of direction, his pedal, his instincts in terms of when he reads, recognizes, and attacks. It's really outstanding in every phase, whether it's man, off, up in the box, in the deep safety, at free safety. Everywhere on the field, he just excels.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you and Mike Renner called him maybe the best corner in the class, and maybe it was a little hyperbole there, but the fact that you think that he has cornerback type of skills, Mike Renner agreed, and you do see that, especially in off coverage. You see how quickly he closes on the ball, and then he has this length. I could actually see some teams, the Seattle Seahawks scheme type of teams, looking at him and saying, all right, we'll make him into a corner. If he fails, he could be a safety, but I can see the Seattle scheme, which loves those long corners, which is now employed by the Jaguars, the Falcons, the Chargers, the 49ers. It's all over the league. I could see some teams actually looking at him at corner.
Well, and he wouldn't be the first one to do that in recent memory. You think of Demarius Randall in Green Bay.
Right.
Obviously, he didn't have a tremendous year last year.
Different body type and everything, but same move.
Yeah, and the other part about that, too, is while I don't think Jamal Adams is bad against the run, I don't think his body type is enough to where he's going to consistently be able to hold up against blockers if he gets down and dirty in the box. Therefore, I think to make the biggest impact for him, that might mean at corner, whether he lines up in the slot a lot in nickel situations, whether some team like you mentioned, like Seattle, does line him up outside. I think he can make a bigger impact there than he can at free safety because he's simply going to be involved in a higher volume of plays that way.
Right. I mean, either way, I think you're talking about a guy that can be a defensive chess piece on that side of the ball. I do like the way he plays in the box, though. I think he plays with great balance. He's been a short tackler. He's a guy that's continued to improve throughout his career, which I also think is pretty important. Last year, peaking with an 89.2 overall grade that led all safeties in the FBS, and that was his true junior season. So he started as a true freshman, continued to progress. Last year, peaking as one of our top-graded safeties from a coverage standpoint and from a run defense standpoint. I don't think he has any problem getting down and dirty in the box. And then he didn't have a ton of opportunities to play center field, but when he did, I still think he has the skills to play there if necessary as well. I think he could at least maybe not be your pure free safety, but I think in two high looks where he's got to play half, split field type of looks, I think he has the versatility to play all over the place.
I think it's also important to point out that there's a difference between time speed and playing speed.
Absolutely.
And I think because of his football intelligence, his playing speed far exceeds that 4.5 that he put up at the combine.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I think that's why you're looking at Adams as a guy that, when I go through my mock draft and I'm looking at the top 10 picks in the draft and who's a good fit and who's not a good fit. And I think Adams can fit almost anywhere in that top 10, whether it's the Chicago Bears at 3. I mean, if the Jaguars hadn't just signed, they just completely revamped their secondary the last couple of years, but he would have been a fit from a scheme standpoint with Jacksonville. Could the Jets use him? Absolutely. Could the Titans use him? Absolutely. All these different teams in the top 10. The Bills at 10, I thought would be a great fit. They have a ton of other needs too, but I think the Bills at 10 would be a good fit when you talk about, a safety that could cover tight ends and do all these different things to try to slow down their division rival, the New England Patriots. But they just invested heavily with Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer coming over, so maybe that eliminates them. But again, up and down that top 10, I see a lot of good fits for Adams. Is there a team that stands out for you on that end, or do you just think, it doesn't matter, slot him in? I think you think he can play.
No, I think that's a fair point that just about anybody in that top 10 could take him. I think not that it's a foregone conclusion, but I think the expectation right now is that Garrett's going to go number 1 to Cleveland.
Right.
So beyond that, if teams don't like a quarterback, I think he's the next guy. I really do. I could see San Fran at number 2, or as you mentioned, Chicago at number 3. I think it's the perfect pick, and it's not a safe pick by any means. He's an impact player at a position where it's tough to find impact players. I think in the past, when you see safeties kind of fall down in the draft, a lot of that is not so much positional value, but the rare guys, they're rare. And
I agree.
And it's hard to come by them. But Jamal Adams has a chance to be that kind of player. That's why I think it's okay to take him in the top 5.
Yeah, I'm completely there. When you hear that the safety doesn't have a lot of value or that linebackers lack positional value, I'm with you. I think it's more to do with how difficult it is to find a guy that can truly affect or truly survive on 3 downs, that can affect the game positively on all 3 downs, in all 3 phases, in coverage, against the run, and then, if you want to use him as a blitzer or as a rusher. I think that's the issue. I mean, if you said, Eric Berry was a top 10 pick, Earl Thomas was a top 15 pick, those guys are absolutely worth it. I think teams went the other way sometimes, and they said, "Yeah, give me Mark Barron. I think he could do everything," but where he lacks in coverage, and he's more of a in the box type of guy. I think that's where teams made mistakes through the years, and they went and tried to find that safety, reached for guys in the top 10. Do you see any of that with Adams, or do you think no, he's pretty clean across the board, he's going to be okay, and he's absolutely worth that top 10?
Yeah, I don't see the reaching with him at all. I don't think just about anywhere in the draft is reaching for him. As you mentioned, coverage. You look at some of the other guys they brought in. To me, the last 4 or 5 years, everyone seems to be trying to get the next Cam Chancellor.
Right.
And the problem with that is when you have a bigger guy that can impose his will in the box, can he also defend the deep end? And that's not the case for a lot of these guys that have gone in the first round at that position. Now, Jamal Adams isn't the huge guy. He's not 6'4", 223 pounds.
Like someone else in this draft.
Like someone else in this draft will be.
Like your other draft crush, Obi.
Right. But at the same time, coverage. That's the important part, right? I mean, when your nickel package is a base package in the NFL, as it is for essentially every team, that means you need to have guys that can cover first.
Right.
And Jamal Adams can do that better than anybody in this draft.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing in all of this. It seems like the teams, if you're a man coverage team, the man coverage teams have to say, okay, we need a guy that can match up with a big receiver, guys that can match up with a shifty receiver, guys that can match up with a tight end, with a slot receiver. So Adams gives you that versatility to match up with tight ends, maybe some slot receivers too, especially the bigger slots, your Marcus Colston, bigger slot receiver types. So I feel comfortable with him doing that. If you're a zone team, you want to have the ability to have that interchangeable safety that could play deep if he needs to, can play zone coverage underneath, can play all these different coverages. I think he has that ability. I thought Carl Joseph, last year's first rounder for the Raiders, I don't think he's as clean of a prospect as Adams, but I think he had that type of coverage versatility and in the box play. So again, I just think it's you're going to hear all the time, matchup league, right? It's all about matchups and who you put these guys up against. Adams gives a matchup weapon to the defense in a league where the offense has been dictating the matchups over the last few years. So that's the biggest thing on Adams. Anything else to kind of wrap it all up, or anything else that stood out to you about his game? I think my biggest thing that I love about him is the constant improvement and the versatility of being able to win all over the field.
Yeah, I think the versatility point is huge. You just think about what teams are doing now from an offensive standpoint to try and create mismatches. They'll flex out a running back for tight ends. They'll go in motion, try and isolate them against linebackers or safeties that aren't as good in coverage outside. That's not going to be an issue for him at all. You might as well take that out of the playbook if you're going to do that with a player that's less skilled than your slot or your regular wide receivers against him.
Couldn't agree more. So there you have it. That's Jamal Adams from LSU, a guy that we see as a top 10 player in this draft. And it looks like that's probably where he's going to land on the first night of the draft.